That's right. More fellow.
Oh yeah.
The official weird AI voice has
Yeah.
summoned us for
Letting y'all
business.
know.
Recording in progress. Awesome. Well, welcome, fellas. This is the Men's Mental Health panel here. This is Athlete Mental Health Week. Welcome to those who are joining us. Just a big picture sort of intro. We've had this incredible week hosted by Hilinski's Hope, Sarah Schultz Foundation, Kevin Love Fund, Athletes for Hope. We're really taking a deep dive into athlete mental health all across the board. Men in sports, women in sports, community, partnership, program building. And we've really looked at this through the lens of a couple of S-themed things like suicide prevention, stress, spiritual support, sleep, all kinds of things that we hear from athletes all the time. And they say, hey, we could use a little bit more help on how to sleep. It's hard being traded one day and then finding yourself on the West Coast in the afternoon. What do I do with that? So this has been a wonderful week. We've had great participation, and this is a panel I've been looking forward to. My name is Mina Merholm. I am a sports psychiatrist based out of New York. I'm the chief well-being officer for Athletes for Hope, and I am a dude who talks to a lot of other fellas about their own mental health. So I'm excited to be joined by these fabulous gentlemen that will dive into this topic today in a fun and meaningful and all kinds of things in between kind of way. So why don't we kick off with a little intro? We can each go around the virtual room just saying hello. Why don't we start with my man Ryan?
Yeah, appreciate that, Dr. Mina. Definitely been an amazing week. So I second that. My parents have been telling me all about it, and I've been keeping up. So I appreciate it. But for those of you that don't know, I'm Ryan Hilinski. Probably everybody doesn't know. Sorry, I didn't mean that to sound in any way, but I'm Ryan Hilinski. Um, I'm the awesome son of Kim and Mark Hilinski, who run Hilinski's Hope. Lost my brother Tyler about 6.5 years ago to suicide, who was a collegiate quarterback. And we've been just trying to change the landscape, like Dr. Mina said, ever since, and just help people along the way. So appreciate it. And I'm happy to be here and talk about all these subjects, no doubt.
Appreciate you being here, Ryan. Thank you so much for all the work that your family's done to honor Tyler's legacy. It's been incredibly powerful, and I'm glad that we get to have you today to chat through
No
that
doubt.
legacy as well.
Appreciate it, Doc.
Uh, let's go to my man Q.
What's up, everybody? My name is Quentin Williams. I was actually a Northwestern football player myself, like Ryan, back in the day. I finished up in 2012, and it was funny that same year I actually learned about the concussion crisis. Before it
Mm.
started to make big headlines, and that really got me interested in the topic around mental health and men beyond sports. And I spent several years in kind of like the corporate sector, I would call it, kind of twiddling my thumbs, trying to think of like how I can help, how I can help solve this problem. And it wasn't until about 6 years later that I actually started a business, actually diving into this. So I work at the intersection of masculinity, athlete transition, um, and identity beyond the game, which is, I know, one topic we'll cover today. As men, we often tie what we do to who we are, and there's no mistake that athletes, we often kind of hang our hat on what we did as a player, just like me, even to this day. So my job is really to help men really establish themselves beyond the game and really come back to their core. So happy to be here. I'm joining from San Diego, originally from Pittsburgh, but excited about today.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Quentin. Appreciate that. Rohan.
Hey guys, my name is Rohan Piple. I'm a former collegiate basketball athlete. I had some opportunities to play overseas, and during that same time, the pandemic happened, and like the whole world, I was forced to sit with myself, and a lot of the stuff I was already struggling with just kind of came, rushing forward. So I had to take the bittersweet decision to step away from my dream, but it started an inward journey in terms of how to overcome that and making sure other athletes didn't have to go through the same thing. So during this whole self-discovery journey, I started a business called AŠVA. I'm just trying to teach athletes how you can improve your performance and wellness at the same time. So just really thankful to be in this space, to be able to learn from everybody, and excited that afterwards we could probably put together an awesome blueprint to how to approach men's mental health altogether.
Appreciate you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Rohan. Appreciate that. And last but not least, Brandon, aka Pat McAfee, just the greatest background that we've got
I'll, I'll start it off by saying I did not play for the Bengals. That is just a helmet that I got when I was reporting with them. But my name is Brandon Say. I'm a former sports reporter. Did that for about 10 years working in the SEC and the NFL, Major League Baseball, and then kind of had my own rock bottom like we all do sometimes. Battled suicidal thoughts and alcoholism. That's where the idea of the mental game came from. It's a mental health podcast where I interview athletes and celebrities to help break the stigma. And then, similar to Ryan's, parents tour the country and try to help break the stigma at high schools, colleges, and with mental health groups, so that we can have conversations like this. So, yeah, I'm really honored to be a part of this and excited to get into this conversation.
Appreciate that, Brandon. Maybe why don't we kick it off from that topic right there? Just if you can start us off, and then folks feel free to jump in there on that topic of, I mean, stigma is like a big umbrella, but in particular with guys, why do you guys feel like it's so difficult for dudes to just have a transparent conversation and be like, hey, this is hard for me. This has been difficult. What have you seen, Brandon, sort of from the mental game or just kind of from your experience in general?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started going into, NFL locker rooms, no one talked about mental health. There was no like conversation about how you were feeling or why aren't you being, yourself. So that's definitely changed over time as the stigma is broken. But I mean, for me personally, I was never taught anything about mental health in school. I remember when I got to my rock bottom moment, 3 years ago, my dad, kind of yelled back at me to toughen up and be a man when I told him I wanted to take my own life. And so that is a defining thing that I think a lot of kids, especially boys, fear hearing from their parents or their best friends. My dad and I worked through that, and he helped me get treatment. And now we talk about mental health more than ever. But I think that's just a prime example of how that conversation has opened up and changed. And when it comes to the show, I mean, I'm lucky enough to sit down with some of the biggest stars and athletes in the country. And one that sticks out to me the most is rapper Kevin Gates, where he told me, you know, it's stronger to be vulnerable than not. It's not a weakness. It's something that we have to embrace. And if you can have a big badass rapper with a teardrop tattoo saying that before he goes out and performs in front of 20,000 people, I think we can all cry and be vulnerable and talk about our feelings.
Love that, man. Totally agree. Totally agree. Especially when people that we view as sort of indestructible, whether it's the big bad rappers or big
Yeah.
bad football player. Um, Folks can feel free to jump in. Ron, I don't know if you've seen this on the basketball world. Big guys just throwing down a windmill dunk. Might be not as easy to cry afterwards. What have you seen in the basketball world?
Definitely. I mean, just speaking from personal experience, like coming from like a minority background in my community, just mental health is very taboo. Just even when I started to speak about my thing and just starting out my own venture, I got a lot of pushback from a lot of family members, a lot of uncles and aunties, like, what are you doing? Acting like it doesn't really exist out there. So, definitely there's a big stigma out there because, just being weak out there is kind of perceived as not the best thing. But then also, I think as males, like we're viewed as like providers and like you got to hold it down, no matter at what cost. And I think that can be a huge burden because, kind of just my own background in terms of like having like a rough child and stuff like that. I kind of had to hold it down for my family, right? I didn't know how to open up, and if I opened up, I would have been a burden to my parents or other people that were going through stuff. So, I can just speak upon like being from an immigrant family and from here. Usually the males that come to this country, they're like, hey, it's all or nothing, man. It's on you, or we don't have anything else. And so, a lot of that pressure and not wanting to fail, I think kind of stems into that stigma. And unfortunately, not everybody's that open to, asking for help or saying, hey, I don't have all the answers and stuff like that.
I hear you on that. I remember seeing somebody in an interview. I don't remember which public figure this was, but he said like mental health sometimes is like a luxury for guys. It's like, oh, you got to function. You got to carry other people. So I don't have the luxury of caring about, my mental health. I don't know. Have you navigated that conversation queue with guys that you've talked to?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to kind of go through like a quick history lesson, at least from my vantage point. I'd love to hear you guys' take on this. This wasn't always the case with men. We used to, in old times, we'd go out for a hunt, together. We would go out and like kill an animal, like go through like this rite of passage that where we took on like, and we identified and we clearly knew what it meant to be a man. And usually that was a rite of passage, and more indigenous cultures, you still have those. Today, we don't have much of a semblance of that, really. Besides, actually, I would say sports is sort of our like crowning of like, you've earned your manhood or your man points. And but that's like our only way of kind of knowing. It's our barometer of modern day culture. We've lost touch with what used to be going out for the hunt, talking to the elders of the group, talking to the younger kids of the group, learning from not just your uncles and your dad around what it means to be a man or TV, but asking, the townspeople, the people in your village, the people that are closest to you. And those traditional rites of passage, like, a young boy will cross a river and like go through a crazy, treacherous experience and be witnessed and be held by all these really powerful men from his life that have had an impact on him to sort of like crown that place marker of what it means to be a man. And we've kind of lost that. I think the only place we kind of have that is sports. But again, I think, sports is almost, at least when I played, finishing up in 2012, like the stigma is still around. And so, no one talked about the stuff in the locker room. If anyone did, I witnessed guys getting, berated about it. It was terrible, not by everybody, but those few kind of bad apples that just make every issue into a bigger issue. So, I think when I look at men and approaching this topic, I think we have to realize that we're not wired to be lone wolves. That if you look at this from from an animalistic kind of tribe mentality, we are not very effective on our own. But somewhere, somehow, we got it in our mind that beyond the game or beyond sports or whatever it is, we think we don't need support. We think we don't need other people's perspectives and ideas and love, or shoulders sometimes. And I think we forget as guys that, we used to rely on each other. That's the big missing piece is we used to rely on each other, and that allowed us to have others rely on us. That I think is the big key differentiator that I think a lot of men are missing these days.
I'm with you. I'm with you. And sometimes the fact that we rely on each other, even if we don't necessarily know each other, like look at us, like we're five guys in a virtual room, and there is a natural sort of connection of like, oh, we've got a shared experience. Like we know what it's like to have, things not go our way or to be discouraged or all kinds of things. So there is this like necessity that we've got. Ryan, can you speak a bit to that, like from your own experience of like being able to lean on others as a young man and as a dude who's like maybe going through something, especially in the context of loss, what's that been like for you?
Well, first, I got to say, Q, like being an outfielder and a defensive end is kind of impressive. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier, but you're an absolute monster. Just had to say that. I think that's a big thing is complimenting one another. I think like that can do a lot for men, just from that point alone. But I think what Q said about relying on each other is just understanding that we're made to be social beings. There wouldn't be two, in all of history, there wouldn't be two humans created, Adam and Eve, whatever it may be, wherever we came from, there wouldn't be two different genders or however many genders you want to say there are today, if we weren't supposed to talk to whoever else there was. So I think he's absolutely right in that sense. And I think the wolf pack is kind of like a prime sense of that. Like the wolf is weak alone against the bear, but if it's the whole pack, they take down the bear. And it's just like an iceberg. You see that you all know the reference I'm thinking of, the tip of the iceberg, and then it's just so fat underneath. But I know that when I lost Tyler, I think the biggest thing for me was I tried to return to normal as fast as possible. I tried to recognize that it wasn't there or understand that it wasn't there and move on and say, okay, Tyler's gone. I'm a man. Like I got to keep going. And I think what really helped me was my dad. Like my dad is a huge, huge part of my life. I can't like thank him enough. And I think this kind of attests to what Q said. Like I didn't really learn how to change a tire when I was younger. And I think that's kind of relatable to our crossing the river per se, like of today's day and age. We don't teach people how to, change their oil. I mean, some people do. I don't know how some, but I don't know a lot of guys that can change an oil at my age. Like right now, if you ask them to, we're going to take it to a shop. So I think like just doing stuff like that. And I've realized it more because I'm in Chicago and I'm training and my parents and my brother have always been around. Like after Tyler, they've always tried to follow me. And I'm sorry for the lengthy answer, but being by myself has made me realize that doing those little tasks, doing little things like that make up your whole day and can like tremendously improve your mental health, whether it be going for a walk with your boys or talking after a stretch or going to a workout. Like just those little things, like talking is such an important piece of it because you don't realize that and you think you can handle it because you're a man. But I think like being a man is both being a man per se, but also being genuine, being vulnerable, and being able to be vulnerable to help others. That's what really kind of a man is in my eyes. So sorry for the one I jumped around a bunch, but a lot of good things to talk about there.
Don't be sorry, man. We're here for the chat. Feel free to
Thank
go any place you want. And actually, no, for the rest of you guys, don't feel like you have to like get called on. Like just jump in.
Like
I'd love to stop.
Grammys, they're
Yeah.
gonna start playing the music or something.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
We gotta move
we're gonna
on.
play you off.
I
You got the
appreciate
floor.
That's a good question.
Yeah, we can all unmute. All unmute. Feel free to, chat when you can, because that's a great place to go, Ryan, in terms of like we can share together. What have you guys seen? That's
Right.
like we know the problem, right? Okay, the toxic masculinity or how the pressure that's on us. I think a really powerful thing that we can get into maybe for a couple of minutes is just like, what have you seen to be helpful when you're talking with a friend or a client or somebody you've interviewed? How do you build community? Like, how do you actually take those small steps? You guys share.
Right. Shoot, I'll start real quick just because I'm just kind of I'm brains on fire. It feels good.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, like what I've seen that doesn't help, but it also is just our day and age in today, like people are sensitive. I'm the first one to admit that I'm hypersensitive. Like just maybe insecure, you could even say it, because there are such standards and goals and like that we have to reach to get to the NFL. If I want to get to the NFL and I'm training right now, I better not take a day off. If even if I'm not feeling it, or I better not miss a lift, or I better not complain about these feelings, because it's like, dude, you can make the NFL, and I relate that to being a man. So I think like being able to be vulnerable and then have conversations like this where if I said something and Q was like, no, Ryan, like, okay, why do you disagree? But then being able to, go back and forth and talk about it is like huge, I think. Some people just shut down because trust is such a big thing to earn for sure nowadays.
Yeah, so much of what you shared there, Ryan, I can relate to. I'll just jump in really quick. I feel like what you referred to of like actually like acknowledging each other and like talking each other up.
Yeah.
I think that does go really, really far. Like I fully appreciate that you shared that with me. And I think it's funny, we're all looking at each other right now. Like we can see each other in the eyes. And, I love to hear Dr. Mana's kind of perspective on this, but men tend to sit at bars facing the TV or facing something in front of them and talk to one another side by side. We
So
don't
true.
connect as easily eye to eye, and there's something kind of primal to that. We actually see it as a threat when we make eye contact with each other. The average guy, but I hate to say it, but like eye contact, the longer you can hold it, the more trust you build with somebody. Like one of the first things I'll do with guys when I get them in a room together, whether it's a workshop or I host a retreat every 6 months in Joshua Tree for like 4 days. And the first thing I'll do is just, not to give things away, but I'll just get them in front of each other and have them get a little uncomfortably close, almost like to the point where like, if someone had a knife, like they could totally take you out. You know what I mean? And there is that trust factor. Part of that is just like your bodily safety, but you go beyond that and it goes into the emotional trust. Can I share something with this guy in front of me? If I share it, does that make me less of a man if I'm struggling with my finances or with my marriage or my self-esteem? Like if I'm struggling with that, are they going to somehow poke a knife at that? Are they going to make that wound worse? Are they going to use that against me? I personally have never felt like anybody could use anything against me. And I'm not saying that from a high place, like I'm somehow superior. I think there comes with when you're comfortable with your own skin and you kind of like know your weaknesses, I think you're okay to share them. But I also have the privilege of having played, D1 college sports, like Ryan and Rohan, and like, you kind of have earned your man points in a lot of ways too. You kind of feel like you can open up a little bit more easily because you have this kind of cred, at your disposal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, Q. Like being comfortable in your own skin and like using that as some type of like some type of credentials to yourself. Because like for me, it was kind of learn like how can I turn like my kryptonite into my biggest superpower? Because living with anxiety, depression, and stuff like that, it's not gonna go away. Like it's kind of like a scar on your hand. So how can I use that to my advantage? And so, not exactly the most proud thing to say, but like when I go through these episodes, I have like really dark thoughts and emotions, but I'm still able to come out of it, right? This week was kind of rough, but I'm still here. So it's kind of like, oh, these thoughts and emotions, they're not exactly true, and I was able to overcome that. And so and even like if you guys or anybody else were to come up to me and say something pretty nasty, I'm like, oh, that doesn't matter too much because I was able to build myself up with that. So, and to your point, like a lot of it is just being awareness, right? So when we're told not to feel things, we kind of huddle up inside of us. But then when we're more aware of it and we're like more of like a non-judgmental observer of your emotions, you have the ability to either walk hand in hand with it, to fight it, or to use it, right? So kind of giving yourself space and kind of just seeing your emotions for what it is. It's not who you are, but this is a part of me. And I had that power to use it either however choose I want to. I think that builds a lot of like independence and just like self-control and self-empowerment. So I love that you touched upon that.
Yeah, heck yeah, Rohan. Thanks for sharing that, bro.
Wow,
This
appreciate
isn't
it.
completely related to the answer, but when you talk about like I think Q, like men interacting more and connecting more, after I went through everything I did with, being suicidal for months and checking myself into a hospital and coming out of that, and I just was a lot more grateful for everything and didn't want to take as much for granted. So every single time I leave one of my friends, it's I love you right in the eyes. Say it right in the eyes with my family, my friends, coworkers. Like it might sound strange to people, but like when you've been at that rock bottom and you thought you weren't going to be there anymore, that's something that I stay in a guest house in LA, like behind a family's like real house. And I'll even like tell them like, all right, love you. I'll see you tomorrow. They're probably like, what the heck is wrong with this dude? But that's just how I operate now. And I've made sure to include it with that bro hug whenever you see your boy back home or, on the road at an event.
Yeah, that support is huge, man. To be able to like hold a guy's eye contact for a little longer than maybe he's comfortable. It's funny, like when me and my girlfriend first got together, yesterday was our 2-year anniversary. But when we
Nice.
first got together, she was actually really uncomfortable with how much eye contact I gave her. Like, you know,
That's great.
and again, I'm not trying to top myself here because I have a lot of demons still, guys. Like, I appreciate Rohan sharing what he shared. I still navigate mental health issues. I still navigate a lot of stress, a lot of burnout, depression at times. Building a business is not easy. I know Rohan knows that struggle too. I'm sure Brandon, you can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan, you're going through your own battles with, trying to make the next level. But I do think that what I've found at least is that the more comfortable I am with myself, like we just talked to, the more comfortable I am with myself and more at peace I am with who I'm not, that allows me to become at peace with who I am. And therefore I can show up to any environment and I can get on stage and talk to somebody and just say like, yeah, I feel a little nervous today, or I kind of had a bad day, and it's not going to, run the thing off course. It's going to be fine. I'm going to get back on the train and we're going to do a good speech, or we're going to do a good talk, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that kind of correlates to a lot of different things, but I think it's emotions as well. It's like if I can, I think a lot of us think that emotions kind of define us, but it's actually just a momentary thing. Emotions aren't meant to live in our body or be from our past or hang on to these things. A lot of guys hang on to shame from things they did or didn't do from 10, 20 years in the past or yesterday, and it still bugs them. But these things were meant to just move through us and just get the information and move on from it. And I think that, the more we can do that and be honest with what we're feeling, the more it has a far less power over us. That's what I found, at least.
Yeah, Q, excuse me. I love what you said. My dad always said, like, you can't have good days without any bad days, you know, and
Mm.
that the bad days are what make the good days so good. So I think, like, I mean, for me, a big thing has been my faith. Like, I leaned into my faith and just believing in that, and just realizing, like, these are demons. These are just bad energy, bad karma, call it whatever you want to call it. They're trying to get at you. And I feel
Mm.
like life is a tough game. And I'm 20. I got a long ways to go. But like, I always view it as just, I mean, if you want to be a man per se, obviously, like I always say, Jesus even had Simon help him carry his cross, and we all have crosses we're carrying. And sometimes that cross just gets a little too heavy. Sometimes people can help you, but like, don't let life win. You know, like, life is a B, and I'll leave it there because the podcast, you know, we don't want to leave it on the show. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I think realizing that, yeah, these are my emotions, but like, hey, we don't got to stay there. You know, you can get yourself out of there. And I think realizing, like, stuff that works for you by doing activities, by doing whatever gets you out of that place. For me, it might be going on a walk, even though we're having a storm here in Chicago. It's flipping freezing. It takes me 20 minutes to get outside, to get layers on. But like, go for a walk, you know, read a book, or watch some. And if you can't do that, then get somebody that you know, that you love. And man, I can't tell you how much I thank my teammates at Northwestern. I can't tell you how much I thank them, because when I was struggling here, and I still I was facing demons this morning at my workout. Like, I didn't even want to go to it. Then I thought about this and our Zoom, and I'm like, man, I got to do that. And then you just flip a switch, you get out of it. And my teammates have been there for me. They wouldn't take no for an answer. When sometimes I wouldn't answer, they even somehow got in my apartment complex, got to my apartment. It was great. They were awesome. They all helped me out. But having that support group, I think, is just a huge thing for sure. And Hugh, I appreciate you saying that, because like, being vulnerable again and talking about your emotions is like kind of getting them out of yourself and into the air, and letting them go wherever they want to go, just not back around your mind and your heart. And I think that's really, really awesome. So thanks for sharing.
I love what you're saying there, Ryan. And I want to go one more layer here in what we're saying, because it feels like in the game of life, kind of, you can have a day where you got a tough game, you lose by a couple points, and you have some days where it feels like you got blown out. It feels like you
Yep.
lost by 50. It feels like this is the darkest day. And you alluded to some of it, Brandon. And I know from like a mental health stats wise, right? Like, guys are just at least 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. Like, we have this like higher risk, high lethality, situation where, our female counterparts, like, they are just naturally better at expressing their emotion, naturally better at being able to be with others. Both either from your own journey or as you're walking through, I'd say, yeah, maybe from your own journey. How do you deal with that like darkest day? Maybe Brandon, if you want to walk through, like, when you were walking through and realizing this can come to a place where I might not be here tomorrow, and for a lot of guys, when they get to that place, they don't even necessarily reach out. They don't check into a hospital. Like, what was the process of actually making sure you're here for this conversation?
I mean, it'll be 3 years ago in March. So here in a few weeks, never thought I would be having this conversation or meeting you guys. I mean, it was 3 months of, I lived in downtown Cincinnati, beautiful bridges to walk home from the bars. I was a big drinker. And so a lot of those lonely nights walking home, crying my eyes out, thinking I'm going to stand in the middle of this thing and say goodbye, and that's it. And so you get to those moments and you don't think it's ever going to change. And finally, I got to a point where, thankfully, kind of what you guys have been saying, I had to tell somebody. I had to be
Mm.
vulnerable, or else I wasn't going to be alive anymore. And so, I went to my mom, went to my dad. I talked about my dad's reaction. But fast forward to when I learned that it's okay to open up, and it's okay to, we censor the B word, so I'll censor it again. But like, you don't want to be called that if you're being vulnerable. If you're a man, you're supposed to be tough and strong. And so I realized that in the hospital. And these two things have really stuck with me that I say every time that I speak, or go to a workshop or anything like that. It's number one, you got to do something. You got to ask for help. You got to reach out to someone you love. And number two, and it's the biggest thing for me, is feelings are temporary. Nothing's the end of the world. When I was standing on that bridge, when I was writing a goodbye letter, when I was struggling in the hospital, I thought that it was over and there was nothing, it was the end of the world. But I had to do step one, ask for help, do something about it. Just knowing that those feelings are temporary has been a big thing for me. Even to this day, you know, Ryan talked about just going on a walk. Like, I love doing that, hiking in LA, listening to music. Just, you have to realize that once you have those tools and you learn that stuff, to use them. We all have bad days still. I mean, you guys were talking about it. I'm on the same boat of like just a million things going on today. But you have those tools, you realize that it's only temporary. And if you, that person in the mirror, wants to make that change and are willing to be vulnerable and open, you can get to a better place. And so for me, that's been the biggest thing in my life that I've learned the last 3 years. I don't even recognize that person, which is crazy.
Mm.
But now it's good because I can identify things that I see in other people when I have conversations and hopefully help them.
Yeah. And like, yeah, just like the second what Brandon said, like when I go through my darkest days and panic attacks and just crying at night and whatnot, so on and so forth, it's just like I'll go through like a cycle of like introspection and release, and it might be,
Mm.
vice versa. A lot of it's kind of like not hiding my emotions, so maybe just letting it all out. All right, so once I let it all out, I'll say, okay, what are you upset about? What is really bothering you? I'll probably write it down on paper, so I'll see what that is. Like, okay, can we address these things? Like, okay, maybe we can address one and two. These are my thoughts, these are my emotions. Once I'm ready, once I'm able to sit with my own thoughts and emotions, I'm then able to then reach out for help, right? Because before, if I'm ashamed of my own stuff, then there's no way I'm gonna share it with nobody else. So once I'm okay with my stuff, then I'll say like, hey, mom, dad, whoever it is in your circle, I need help with this. And then once I'm with that, and I'm able to talk it out with somebody, I'm really big in self-help books, scriptures, faith, and going through that whole process, I'm able to take that gold nugget out, no matter how bad that day or moment was, learn from that, put it in my pocket, and say, hey, man, I'm really thankful for the fact that I showed up for myself. I was able to go through this, and guess what? I'm gonna keep going throughout the day and throughout this whole week. And so that's kind of how I go about it, kind of like a process of introspection and release. And like that form of release comes in different ways. Some days, like Ryan said, I'll go for a walk. Some days I'll do some type of prayer, meditation, where basically kind of like centering yourself, like where you're able to be present in the moment and then visit things from the past or future. Because if you're not able to make that distinction, that means like in your brain, everything's happening to you all at one time. If you're able to make
Mm.
that distinction, like, hey, I'm safe right now, but I'm going to go revisit this from the past and the future, it kind of gives you that safe space and kind of makes you kind of has like that own, like that self aura where like, okay, this bubble, nobody can come into this, and I can really explore my thoughts and emotions and kind of get that gold nugget out and just kind of keep moving forward after that.
Yeah, I
Love.
love it, Rohan. Sorry, Dr.
Yeah.
Bean, I don't interrupt,
Please,
but like,
please.
I think that's spot on, and I journal myself. I try and write down everything that happened during the day. But like, I think one thing too, I think I didn't want to take away from Rohan's point, but I didn't want to forget it, is that society's norms have changed. Like
Mm.
society's expectations of what men are, I feel like have changed. And it's like a category that we're trying to check all these boxes, and society can go F itself, right? And I think we need to rewrite society's norms in a sense that like, hey, it's okay, like exactly what we're doing now. This needs to be kind of more common, and like we need to just have more conversations like this, because then it gets integrated into the mainstream, of society. Then we have this conversation. Q and I have it at a coffee shop in a couple, even though he's in San Diego, God bless him, that's amazing. But like, I think that is such a big thing for us. And then real shoot, I was going to say another thing, but I'll remember it. But I think society's norms, like of people trying to meet something that's just unattainable, anymore. Like we, if the times are changing, if technology, if everything is changing right around us every day, and we've had all of these expectations met before us, we have to change with those. I feel like otherwise you just don't survive with those times, and then it becomes a domino effect kind of deal. And I've spiraled plenty of times. And I remember being at the Las Vegas Bowl. We were playing Utah, and man, that was probably the hardest week of my life. I couldn't even make it to practice some days, I felt like. And exactly like Mr. Brandon said, I told my dad, and my dad did anything and everything he could to get me help, as well as my mom, and I made it through that week. And I think of it sometimes as a nap, like, you know, not literally a nap, but like your emotions are kind of like a nap. You know, you're upset, you need some food or something, take a nap, hour later, boom, your emotions reset, everything's back on the same level. So like I feel like you can do that. It's just you got to find that reset button, you know, for yourself, whatever it may be. So sorry, but yeah.
Man, what a great so close to home example there, Ryan. Like the Vegas Bowl, that was just this past year, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And to think like a lot of people are probably thinking, oh man, he must be on the top of his game, like feeling
Huh.
like, you know, top of the world, like
Right.
about to go to a bowl game. And
Probably the hardest week I've, besides Tyler, that was probably the hardest week of my life for sure.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of wild because like as a coach, you know, and I'm sure Dr. Mana as like as a psychiatrist wants to address two things. Like I want to say like, okay, how can you deal with this situation better, right? Like how can are there tools like maybe breath work or meditation or journaling or for me sometimes it's like hitting a pillow. Like I bought some boxing gloves and I have like this old pad that I'll go to town on. Because as a former player, I used to tackle people for a living,
Right.
and it was a
And
beautiful
it's
way for
taken
me
away
to,
from you like that.
yeah, yeah. And, you know, I went right into yoga after football. Like,
Okay.
and so I started to, what I learned through that was I learned to process emotion a little bit differently than always having to go to the gym or go hit a punching bag.
Mm.
But I'll be honest, like some days, like the meditation or the breath work, it ain't cutting it, you know, and I got to go to town on something. And it, I think emotions are so interesting that as men, usually anger is like, we think it's the primary emotion. We think that's like what we're feeling. But once you go and express that, you go punch something, you go like, you know, maybe even blow up on a friend, unfortunately, and you take it out
Yeah.
on the wrong people. Underneath that anger is often one of three things. It's some kind of shame. Like I feel embarrassed. I feel like I should have done this or should have done that. I feel like I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting defensive and I'm getting angry, but I'm really ashamed. Could be sadness and disappointment, like feeling hurt by somebody. We always get really pissed off at our friends when they bail on us last minute, or we,
Yeah.
you know, like we had plans and it's like, you're not angry, dude. You're actually hurt. Like this dude
100%.
hurt
Yes.
you, you know? And then
Yeah.
the third emotion is often fear. Like I'm afraid that this is going to continue. I'm afraid no one's going to like me long term. I'm never going to have
Mm.
friends. I'm going to be alone, you know? So that's a good barometer. Like you're probably experiencing anger, but when I start to go to town on something, I'll usually uncover something deeper like sadness, shame, or fear.
Mhm.
I know we could probably talk about that topic for a bunch right here, but I want to say one more point, which is that all of those things are simply ways to deal with what we're experiencing. They're not necessarily a way to heal what we need to experience, right?
Mm.
And in my experience, working with so many athletes and myself included, I've worked with tons of therapists, coaches, all kinds of modalities. Um, it all really comes back to how we're orienting with ourselves, our relationship with ourselves and our past, right? And how do we navigate that, right? What needs to be healed? I know a lot of us are high performers, and I've worked with so many guys that get into high performance, you know, fields like being a lawyer after, you know, finishing up or, you know, being a professional athlete, all these different high performance things. And they get down the road and they realize they've actually been covering up some insecurity from
Mm.
way far back in the past. And like for me, that little boy is who I really need to spend more time with. So, you know, all the punching bags in the world aren't going to help me until I heal that little boy, you know, deep
Yeah.
down. That's more of the core piece that I think more of us are afraid to really talk about. And like, I don't like talking about the little boy inside of me, but it's there, you know, like it's real and it's in every one of us, you know? So that's where real healing comes from.
Yeah.
Definitely. I appreciate that, man. And there's you got to talk about big Q and little Q. You know, that's the throughout. And I think in this whole conversation, it's great that we're talking about both like the day to day. What can we do to sort of you know, here's a practical tool that we can get through. And we've also talked about like the darkest day, and we can. I know there's a lot of this that we can unpack for a while. This is why we should have multiple podcasts, and we should you know, have more of a series of this. But I wanted to sort of close for us in this direction as you guys are thinking about as guys and as you've struggled with figuring out that core that Q was talking about. My core identity as an athlete, my core identity as a reporter, my core identity as a man. What's something that you feel has helped you, define yourself beyond your performance? That way, if the performance is not good, we don't necessarily crumble. Whether for you personally or for folks that you've been sort of friends with, working with on some level. And that would sort of be the parting gift, I would say, to the audience that we have here, is just because oftentimes we're defined by performance or, we don't see beyond that. So I'd love to hear from you a closing thought around how we view our identity beyond our performance. I think, Brandon, you were saying something.
Yeah, it just came to mind of like it took me until about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to really be happy being me, which sounds crazy, but I don't think I was ever truly happy my whole life until I realized that you can't obtain that happiness, that love, whether you want it for a job, a relationship, a goal in your life, until you have that love for yourself. And so it sounds corny
Mm.
if you have never addressed it, or maybe it sounds weird, but like, yeah, I was always looking for it in other things, other people, job, relationships, friends. But now, like, I'm okay on my own. Like, I was always had that alone feeling, and I always dreamed of that picture perfect, marriage, family. I never had that. Haven't had it. And that's okay. Like, I'm alone, but in a good way. Like, now, like, I know that I'm not alone, but I'm okay being on my own, if that makes sense. And so it took me a long time to get to that point. And so I think my advice to anyone that's struggling in that alone feeling is, again, reach out for help. Know that those things are temporary, but also you got to find it from within. Just like if you're struggling with your mental health, it takes that person in the mirror to ask for help. You can have all these amazing resources. We can have this conversation. You can go to therapy. But if you don't apply the things or really want that help yourself, then that change isn't going to happen. And so finding a way to love yourself, I think, has really changed and saved my life. It's what made me happy for the first time ever.
Um, and then yeah, I'll add to that, like in terms of viewing yourself, who you are and what you do are two separate things, right? And I always tell myself that. I always tell the athletes I work with, and I always tell them like, and I always say this to myself: I'm not this body, I'm not these emotions. I am the soul. The soul is infinite. It can go past any type of barriers, any labels, anything like that. And then also, one of my close buddies, his name is Cy Tamala. He was a walk-on at Arizona State, went to JUCO, ended up being one of the first South Asians to kill it at University of Hawaii. But the whole process was, am I showing up for myself every day, and am I controlling these three things, like my attitude, my concentration, and my effort? Because as a walk-on, he would be busting people's asses, but no type of minutes, right? But he's like, all right, I had to refigure this value system of mine, otherwise I'm gonna get burnt out. So every day is like, am I preparing the best way? For example, for a jump shot, if my footwork the best, and my shoulders squared up, and then everything else after that, I let it go. So anything that he has complete 110% control over, which is his attitude, his concentration and effort, if he was able to nail that down every day, then he's like, man, it's a successful day, and he was able to build upon that every day, every day, every day, and naturally he was able to get his goal and really ball out at the next level. So I would say that would be the biggest thing or type of advice I could share with people.
Man, I want to double click on that, man. I feel like this is kind of building. And something Ryan brought up earlier was his relationship with God, his relationship with faith. And I'd like to separate religion from faith just for a moment. I think what we're really talking about in this whole conversation is the power of not just action from a masculine perspective and taking more action and being more bold. Those are great masculine qualities. But the feminine parts of all of us is really that faith. It's really that surrender. And it's like controlling what I can control, like those three things Rohan mentioned, and then leaving it up to God, leaving it up to a bigger thing that I have no explanation for, right? This synchronistic, getting in the flow, in the zone kind of feeling you have as an athlete, and it's indescribable. You don't really know how to get there, but it just happens. But I will tell you that the way that I've gotten there as an athlete and in real life is that I've come back to a core principle I use in my coaching. Is it's actually called the core identity, and it's finding three things in your life. This is something Russell Wilson has done all of his career, thanks to his mental performance coach, Trevor Moawad, rest his soul. Came up with three things that make him great, that he can focus on as a quarterback to remain poised. And it's basically like his fundamentals. As a pitcher, I had three things I could focus on at a time. We can't focus on much more than that. So if you can simplify your operations to mechanics and simplicity, the simpler the better, because you're going to come back to inevitably your strengths and not your weaknesses. You're going to come back to the things that make you you, you know? Um, so, you know, if it's being focused, if it's, you know, if it's coming back to the basics and the mechanics of what makes you you, that's really what core identity is all about to me. And then after that, it's kind of letting go and letting God from my perspective.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I'll kind of third that a little bit. Like I have three things. Kind of just controlling what you can control is what I kind of my foundation of sorts. Like you can control who you are as a person, how you treat people, how you go about your day, how you do anything you do. That's in your control. How people react to you, not in your control. Can't do nothing about
Mm.
it. How a certain situation goes, it's all about luck. Sorry, it's all about timing, opportunity, and preparation. I think you have to have all three kind of in a way. You can be prepared, have great luck, terrible timing, and it just doesn't work out. You can't control it. You could be lucky, be prepared, have terrible, I said timing again, but that's kind of that's kind of my sense of things. And then also the last two would be just be giving yourself some grace, you know, and letting
Mm.
yourself know that you're loved and you're working so hard. The probability of us being alive and being in this world and having parents and being even able to have technology like we are having, like on Zoom, and being able to have Wi-Fi and a roof over our heads, like giving yourself grace and realizing, hey, I've made it this far and I'm still going. You know how many, and God bless Tyler. I think God called him early because the demons were just too much. But like I made it farther than Tyler, and I think he made it as far as he could go. And I'm
Mm.
so proud of him for doing that and just loving one another. I think it's like you love conquers and wins all, I think. And I think I wish I loved him more. And I think love could go a long ways, because I think there's not enough in this world. And if you watch somebody's face in their eyes when you tell them a compliment or give them something that they've never heard in a while, oh, the difference is just amazing. And I think it could go really. I still remember stuff from last week that somebody said I had some nice shoes, and I was like, dude, these are just Nike Air Forces. Like, but thanks. Like, I appreciate. Like, it made me so. And then I still talk to the guy now, and we're new friends. And I think just being able to be vulnerable and giving yourself grace, loving yourself, and just controlling what you can control, and not being upset with whatever outcome comes, because like you can't control it, you know. And just, yeah, giving yourself that grace is huge. And I appreciate all of you guys. Shoot, like just you're hearing your testimonies and being vulnerable like that, like it's just awesome. And I love using the word awesome because it's freaking awesome. You guys are great. And I think we just need more people like you guys out in the world, because like just it could be, the world could be such a sweet place if people were just a little bit nicer. And you know what we do, Dr. Mita, we have wristbands like these. So we always go about our days and we try and give three people three random compliments. Or it's, you know, it doesn't have to be your friends. It could be random people or your friends or family, but three compliments. And then maybe you inspire them to give somebody a compliment, and then it's a trickle effect. So anyways, sorry, I'll shut up. Not sorry, but I'll shut up. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
There you go. No, there's no better note to end on, Ryan. You're inspiring me, man. I just want to say, huh?
I was just telling Q, go Cats. That's what we do.
Go
Go
Cats.
Cats. Go
Not many
Cats.
people know that, but go Cats.
Go with it. Go Cats, go Birds. It's that kind of week. All animals are going. But I just want to appreciate you guys, man. Just thank you for this. Was like hanging out with the boys, and at the same time evidence-based tools, and at the same time some very specific, tips for folks. And this is life-saving stuff, So I'm grateful to each of you for the way that you guide other men in this journey. This is something that we need a lot more of. And exactly like my man Ryan said, I want you to know that you guys are loved. I love you guys. I'm like honored to be in your presence. And thank you for those who tuned in with us for this as well. This has been a powerful conversation that we'll also be sharing. And hopefully we'll keep going. We'll have more of these kinds of combos that are much needed, of how we can give ourselves grace, how we can control what we can control, and how we can continue to show up and be there for each other as men and as a family, as a community. So just thank you so much, Ryan, Q, Brandon, Rohan. This was wonderful. I'm really grateful for your time, and thank you for all of those who've been participating in Athlete Mental Health Week. This has been an incredible week.
Same
Thanks.
Thank you
here.
so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to
Love
meet you
y'all
guys.
too. Gotta say
Love
it.
y'all
Love you
too.
guys.
Thank you.
All right, fellas.
With eye
Love it.
contact.
Nice
Make it
shirt,
weird.
Brandon.
Hey.
Loving it, bro.